Hey guys, tonight we begin with a single moment that could have rewritten the entire history of Westeros. What if the most honorable man in the Seven Kingdoms had refused to play by corrupt rules? What if Ned Stark, facing execution in the Great Sept of Baelor, had invoked an ancient right that even kings cannot deny? Tonight we explore how one act of defiance could have prevented a devastating war and changed the fate of every major house in the realm. Picture this. The crowd has gathered. The executioner's block is ready. Queen Cersei stands triumphant, believing her enemy is finally defeated. But then Ned Stark speaks words that freeze everyone in place. Words that turn certain death into unexpected hope. Words that make the Queen realize her perfect plan has a fatal flaw she never considered. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Get into your blanket, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. What you're about to discover is how this single moment of courage ripples through every corner of the Seven Kingdoms, how Robb Stark's war takes a completely different path, how Jon Snow's destiny changes forever, how the Faith Militant rises not in revenge but in righteousness, how even Tyrion Lannister finds himself choosing unexpected sides. In this timeline, the Red Wedding becomes impossible. The Purple Wedding never needs to happen. Sansa's suffering ends before it truly begins. And the Game of Thrones itself must bow to something more powerful than gold or steel. But what is this ancient right that Ned invokes? What are these words that change everything? And why does Queen Cersei look so terrified when she hears them? You see, there's something the Queen forgot in her rush to destroy her enemies. Something about the old laws, the sacred laws, that even corrupt kings must respect. When Ned Stark stands before the crowd and speaks these fateful words, he doesn't just save his own life. He ignites a flame of justice that spreads across the entire realm. The common people remember what honor looks like. The faith rediscovers its true purpose, and for the first time in years, the Iron Throne faces a challenge it cannot simply crush with violence. So let me take you to that pivotal morning in King's Landing, when the Lord of Winterfell made a choice that would echo through generations, transforming not just his own fate, but the destiny of everyone he loved. The morning sun streams through the stained glass windows of the Great Sept of Baelor, casting colorful patterns across the stone floor where Ned Stark kneels. The crowd has gathered in anticipation, their voices a low murmur of excitement and dread. Queen Cersei stands on the steps above, her green eyes gleaming with satisfaction as she watches her greatest enemy brought low. Young King Joffrey fidgets with excitement, eager to see the traitor's blood spilled. Sir Ilyn Payne stands ready, the ancient Valyrian steel sword ice gleaming in his hands, the same blade that has served House Stark for generations now poised to end the line's most honorable lord. The High Septon begins his solemn words, preparing to oversee what should be a simple execution of a confessed traitor. But as the moment arrives for Ned to speak his final words of confession, something extraordinary happens. Instead of the expected plea for mercy or acceptance of his fate, Ned Stark raises his head and looks directly at the Queen. His voice, clear and unwavering, cuts through the morning air like a blade itself. "I demand trial by combat." The four words hit the gathered crowd like a thunderclap. Gasps ripple through the assembled masses. Queen Cersei's triumphant smile freezes on her face, her complexion draining of color as the implications hit her. King Joffrey's mouth falls open in confusion and rage. Even Sir Ilyn Payne hesitates, the great sword wavering in his grip. The High Septon, however, nods solemnly. The ancient laws are clear, and even he cannot deny this sacred right. The accused has invoked trial by combat, he announces to the crowd. It is his right under the old laws and the new. Ned remains kneeling, but his posture has changed. No longer the defeated prisoner, he embodies the strength and honor that made him legendary. His gray eyes meet Cersei's green ones across the Sept steps, and she sees something there that terrifies her. Not desperation, but conviction. Not fear, but faith in justice itself. The crowd begins to murmur more loudly now. Many have heard the stories of Ned Stark's prowess with a sword. They remember tales of his victories during Robert's rebellion, his skill in single combat, his unwavering honor even in the face of death. Suddenly, what seemed like certain execution has become something far more uncertain. Cersei recovers quickly, her political instincts taking over. The traitor seeks to delay his rightful punishment, she declares, but her voice lacks its earlier confidence. She knows the law as well as anyone. Trial by combat is an ancient right, one that even the crown cannot simply dismiss. Joffrey, however, is not so easily controlled. "I am the king," he shouts, his boyish voice cracking with rage. I say he dies now, but the High Septon shakes his head firmly. The faith may bow to the crown in many matters, but the sacred laws of trial by combat are inviolate. Ned slowly rises to his feet, his chains clanking softly in the sudden quiet. When he speaks again, his voice carries across the Sept with the authority of a man who has never compromised his principles. "I have served the realm faithfully for years. I have been loyal to the crown, protective of the innocent and honest in all my dealings. If I am truly guilty of treason, then let the gods decide through combat." The crowd is completely silent now, hanging on every word. Many of these common folk have heard whispers of the queen's true nature, of the king's cruelty, of the corruption that festers in the Red Keep. Here stands a man they know to be honorable, claiming his ancient right to prove his innocence through trial by combat. Tyrion Lannister, watching from his position near the Sept steps, cannot suppress a small smile. Trust Ned Stark to find honor even in the jaws of defeat. The dwarf's sharp mind is already calculating the political implications of this unexpected development, and he finds himself oddly hopeful for the first time in months. Varys, ever present in the shadows, feels a chill of anticipation. His carefully laid plans suddenly face an unexpected variable. The spider's web trembles as this single thread threatens to unravel everything he has woven. Even Littlefinger, master manipulator that he is, finds himself genuinely surprised. He had counted on Ned's honor being his weakness, never imagining it might become his salvation. The mockingbird's song catches in his throat as he realizes the game board has just been completely rearranged. Queen Cersei's mind races frantically. She needs a champion, someone who can defeat the legendary swordsman of the North. But who? Her thoughts turn to Ser Gregor Clegane, the Mountain. But he is not in King's Landing. Ser Meryn Trant, competent, but hardly a match for Ned Stark in his prime. The High Septon raises his hands for silence. The trial by combat will be held at dawn tomorrow in the courtyard of the Red Keep. The accused may choose to fight for himself or name a champion. The crown must do likewise. His words are formal, ritualistic, but they carry the weight of centuries of tradition. As guards move to escort Ned back to his cell, he catches sight of a familiar face in the crowd. Yoren of the Night's Watch stands among the common folk, his weathered face showing a mixture of surprise and grim satisfaction. Their eyes meet for just a moment, and Ned sees something there that gives him hope. The crowd begins to disperse, their excited chatter filling the morning air. What had promised to be a simple execution has become something far more dramatic. Word will spread quickly through King's Landing and beyond. The Honorable Ned Stark has chosen to fight for his life and his principles. As he is led away, Ned allows himself a small moment of satisfaction. He has played by their rules long enough. Now, finally, he will play by his own. The news spreads through King's Landing faster than wildfire on a summer day. From the great sept of Baelor to the lowest taverns in Flea Bottom, from the noble houses to the merchant quarters, every tongue carries the same incredible tale. Ned Stark, the honorable Lord of Winterfell, has demanded trial by combat. The man everyone expected to see executed has instead invoked an ancient right that even kings must respect. In the Red Keep, chaos reigns behind closed doors. Queen Cersei paces her solar like a caged lioness, her golden hair whipping around her shoulders as she turns again and again. Her carefully orchestrated plan to eliminate her greatest threat has crumbled in a matter of moments. She had counted on Ned's honor being his weakness, expecting him to confess his supposed crimes to protect his daughters. Instead, that same honor has become his shield. Grand Maester Pycelle shuffles into the Queen's chambers, his ancient face creased with worry. The old man has served many rulers, witnessed countless political maneuvers, but even he seems shaken by this unexpected turn. "Your Grace," he begins, his voice trembling slightly, "the law is quite clear on this matter. Trial by combat is an ancient right, recognized by the faith and protected by centuries of tradition. We cannot simply ignore it." Cersei whirls on him, her green eyes blazing with fury. "Do not lecture me about laws, old man. Find me a way around this, or find yourself a new position." But even as she speaks, she knows the truth. The faith militant may be weakened, but they still command respect among the common people. To deny Ned Stark his right to trial by combat would risk uprising among the faithful, something the crown cannot afford. Meanwhile, in the black cells beneath the Red Keep, Ned sits in contemplative silence. The damp stone walls that once seemed like the boundaries of his tomb now feel different. He has bought himself time, precious time that might yet save not just his life, but his family's honor. The decision to demand trial by combat was not made lightly. He knows the risks, understands that he might still die, but he would rather die fighting for truth than live having betrayed everything he believes in. Word of Ned's demand reaches the Tower of the Hand, where Tyrion Lannister sits in his father's former chambers, trying to make sense of the political chaos surrounding him. The dwarf's sharp mind immediately grasps the implications of this development. His sister's plans have been thrown into complete disarray, and for the first time since arriving in King's Landing, Tyrion sees an opportunity to do something truly honorable. He calls for his personal guard, a grizzled veteran named Bronn, who has served him faithfully despite his sellsword nature. "Bronn," Tyrion says, his voice unusually serious, "I want you to find out everything you can about the conditions in the black cells, who guards them when they change shifts, what kind of food they're giving Lord Stark, and be discreet about it." Bronn raises an eyebrow but nods. He has learned to trust Tyrion's instincts, and something about the dwarf's tone suggests this is more than idle curiosity. "You thinking of helping the wolf, my lord?" "I'm thinking of helping justice," Tyrion replies, "something that's been in short supply in this city lately." Across the narrow sea, in the ancient fortress of Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon receives the news with a mixture of surprise and grim satisfaction. His spies in King's Landing have sent word of Ned's unexpected gambit, and the rightful king sees an opportunity to strike at his enemies when they least expect it. If the honorable Lord of Winterfell can prove his innocence through trial by combat, it would cast serious doubt on the legitimacy of Joffrey's rule. Stannis calls for his maester to prepare ravens. Messages must be sent to potential allies, lords who might be swayed by Ned's stand for justice. The timing could not be better. While Cersei scrambles to find a champion capable of defeating Ned Stark, Stannis can rally support for his own claim to the throne. In the north at Winterfell, Catelyn Stark receives the news with a mixture of relief and terror. Her husband lives, but for how long? She knows Ned's skill with a sword is legendary, but he has been imprisoned for weeks, weakened by poor food and harsh conditions. Can he still fight as he once did? The uncertainty gnaws at her as she calls for her son Robb. The young wolf, as his men have begun calling him, receives his mother's summons in the great hall where he has been planning his march south. The army he has gathered is impressive, but he had been preparing for a rescue mission, not a legal battle. His father's decision to demand trial by combat changes everything. Mother, Robb says, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. What does this mean for our plans? Corton looks at her eldest son, seeing so much of Ned in his honorable bearing. It means your father has found a way to fight back using their own laws against them. But it also means we must be ready to act quickly. If he wins, we'll need to be prepared to support him. If he loses, she cannot finish the sentence. He won't lose, Robb says firmly. Father has never lost a fight when justice was on his side. The young lord's confidence spreads through the gathered northern lords. They remember Ned Stark's prowess in Robert's Rebellion, his victory over Sir Arthur Dayne's companion at the Tower of Joy, his reputation as one of the finest swordsmen in the Seven Kingdoms. If any man can win a trial by combat against whatever champion the crown produces, it is the honorable Ned Stark. At Riverrun, Catelyn's brother Edmure Tully receives similar news and immediately begins calling his banners. The Riverlords have always been close allies of the North, and Ned's marriage to Catelyn has strengthened those bonds. If the Lord of Winterfell can prove his innocence through combat, it will vindicate all those who have stood by him. Even in the Vale, where Lysa Arryn has been hiding behind her mountain walls, the news creates ripples of excitement. The Lords of the Vale remember Ned's friendship with Jon Arryn, remember how he stood by their former lord in all things. Some begin to whisper that perhaps it is time to leave the safety of the Eyrie and take a stand for justice. Back in King's Landing, the common people gather in taverns and market squares to discuss this remarkable turn of events. Many have heard stories of Ned Stark's honor, his fairness in governing, his protection of the innocent. The idea that such a man might be guilty of treason seems impossible to many. If he is willing to stake his life on proving his innocence, perhaps there is more to this story than they have been told. The faith militant, though officially disbanded, still maintains influence among the devout. In hidden gatherings, they speak of Ned's courage in invoking the old laws, of his willingness to trust in the gods' justice. Some begin to see him as a symbol of righteousness standing against corruption, a man who embodies the values they hold dear. In the Red Keep's Godswood, Sansa Stark kneels before the Heart Tree, praying to the old gods and the new for her father's safety. The news of his demand for trial by combat has reached her through whispered conversations among the servants. For the first time since arriving in King's Landing, she feels a flicker of hope. Her father has found a way to fight back, to stand up for what is right. Arya, still disguised as a boy in the castle's lower levels, overhears conversations between guards about the upcoming trial. Her heart swells with pride at her father's courage, but she also feels a deep fear. She has seen the corruption of King's Landing firsthand, knows how the powerful manipulate the system to their advantage. Will they really allow her father a fair chance to prove his innocence? The ripples of Ned's decision continue to spread, touching lives throughout the Seven Kingdoms. In Dorne, Prince Oberyn Martell receives word of the trial and sees an opportunity to strike at the Lannisters indirectly. If Ned can expose their corruption, it might create the opening Dorne needs to seek justice for Princess Elia's murder. Even across the Narrow Sea, Daenerys Targaryen's advisors bring her news of the political chaos in Westeros. The young Dragon Queen, still learning to rule, sees in Ned's stand a reminder of the honor and justice that should guide true leadership. Perhaps when she finally returns to claim her birthright, she will find allies among those who still believe in doing what is right. As night falls over King's Landing, the city buzzes with anticipation. Tomorrow's dawn will bring the trial by combat, a test not just of skill with a sword, but of the very nature of justice itself. The Honorable Lord of Winterfell has thrown down the gauntlet, challenging the corruption that has taken root in the heart of the realm. In the Black Cells, Ned Stark prepares for what may be his final battle, knowing that win or lose, he has remained true to his principles. The first ripples of his decision have spread far and wide, and now all of Westeros waits to see what the dawn will bring. In the depths of the Red Keep's black cells, where countless prisoners have waited for death, Ned Stark begins a different kind of preparation. The damp stone walls that have witnessed so much despair now become the boundaries of his spiritual and physical training ground. The man who once ruled the North from the comfort of Winterfell's great hall must now prepare for the most important battle of his life, in conditions that would break lesser men. The hours before dawn bring a strange peace to the dungeons. Ned sits cross-legged on the cold stone floor, his back straight despite the chains that bind his wrists. In his mind he travels back to the Godswood of Winterfell, to the ancient weirwood tree where he has always found clarity. The faces carved into the pale bark seem to watch him even here, in this place far from the old god's direct influence. He remembers his father Rickard's teachings about honor in the face of adversity. A man's true character, the elder Stark had said, is revealed not when times are easy, but when everything seems lost. Ned had been young then, barely past his 10th name day, but the words had taken root in his heart, like seeds in fertile soil. Now, decades later, they bloom into the strength he needs to face what lies ahead. The sound of footsteps echoes through the corridor, and Ned opens his eyes to see a familiar figure approaching his cell. Yoren of the Night's Watch stands in the shadows, his weathered face grave but determined. The old recruiter has somehow gained access to the dungeons, whether through bribery or his own cunning connections, Ned cannot say. "Lord Stark," Yoren says quietly, glancing around to ensure they are not overheard. "I've brought you something." From beneath his black cloak, he produces a small bundle wrapped in rough cloth. Inside, Ned finds dried meat, hard bread, and most importantly, a whetstone. "I cannot give you back your sword," Yoren continues, "but I can help you prepare your mind and body for what's coming. The Night's Watch remembers its friends, my lord, and you've always been a friend to the Wall." Ned accepts the gifts gratefully, understanding the risk Yoren has taken to bring them. "Tell me," he says, "what word comes from the north?" "Your boy Robb has called the banners. The whole north is marching, my lord, but they're marching for justice now, not just revenge. Word of your trial by combat has spread like wildfire. Men who might have stayed neutral are taking sides, and most of them are choosing yours." The news brings warmth to Ned's heart. His son understands the significance of this moment, the opportunity to prove their house's honor through legal means rather than simple warfare. "And my daughters?" "Safe, as far as I know. The little bird still sings her songs, and the wolf pup runs with different wolves now. They're both stronger than you might think, my lord." After Yoren leaves, Ned begins his preparation in earnest. The physical conditioning comes first. His body has been weakened by weeks of imprisonment, poor food, and the stress of captivity. He cannot hope to match his former strength, but he can maximize what remains. Using the chains as weights, he begins a series of exercises designed to restore flexibility and power to muscles grown stiff from disuse. The mental preparation proves even more crucial. Ned closes his eyes and visualizes every combat technique he has ever learned. The lessons from his youth at the Eyrie under Jon Arryn's tutelage, where he learned to fight alongside Robert Baratheon. The brutal realities of Robert's rebellion, where theory became deadly practice. The sparring sessions in Winterfell's yards, where he maintained his skills through years of peace. He thinks of his brother Brandon, who had been the better swordsman in their youth, but whose hot temper had led to his downfall. Ned had always been more methodical, more patient, qualities that served him well in both war and governance. Now those same qualities must serve him in trial by combat. The spiritual aspect of his preparation draws him back to the teachings of the old gods. Unlike the faith of the Seven, with its complex theology and political machinations, the old gods demand something simpler and purer. They require truth, honor, and the courage to stand by one's convictions even unto death. These are qualities Ned has cultivated his entire life, and now they must be his armor and shield. As the night deepens, other visitors find their way to his cell. Tyrion Lannister appears like a shadow, moving with surprising stealth for a man of his stature. The dwarf's face shows genuine concern, a stark contrast to his family's typical indifference to suffering. "Lord Stark," Tyrion says, settling onto a stone ledge outside the cell, "I've come to offer what assistance I can, though I confess it may not be much. Your presence here is assistance enough, Lord Tyrion. It speaks well of your character that you would risk your family's displeasure to visit a condemned man." Tyrion waves away the compliment, though Ned can see it affects him. "My family's displeasure is hardly a new experience for me. But tell me, do you have any preference for who the crown might choose as their champion?" Ned considers the question carefully. "I would expect them to choose their strongest fighter, regardless of honor or justice. Sir Gregor Clegane, perhaps, if he can be summoned in time. The mountain is in the Riverlands, burning and pillaging in your family's name. Ironically enough, they'll need someone else. Sir Meryn Trant is competent, but hardly legendary. Sir Boros Blount is past his prime. The Hound is complicated in his loyalties these days." The conversation turns to strategy and tactics, with Tyrion offering insights into the fighting styles of various knights who might serve as the crown's champion. Despite their brief acquaintance, Ned finds himself appreciating the dwarf's keen intelligence and surprising moral compass. "There's something else," Tyrion says, as he prepares to leave. "My brother Jaime once told me that you were one of the few men he genuinely respected as a swordsman. He said you fought with honor even when honor was inconvenient. That's not something he says lightly." After Tyrion departs, Ned reflects on the unexpected alliance forming around him. Men who should be his enemies are offering aid and comfort. Perhaps his decision to demand trial by combat has revealed something important about the nature of justice in Westeros. Even among his opponents, there are those who recognize the value of giving honor a chance to defend itself. The pre-dawn hours bring a different kind of visitor. The High Septon himself descends to the black cells, his simple robes a stark contrast to the ornate vestments he wears in public ceremonies. The man's face shows genuine spiritual concern rather than political calculation. "Lord Stark," the High Septon says, "I have come to offer you the comfort of prayer before your trial. I am grateful, Your Holiness, though my gods are not yours. All gods who value justice are allied in this moment. The Seven, the old gods, even the Lord of Light, all stand against corruption and lies. Your trial by combat serves a purpose greater than any one faith." They spend the remaining hours before dawn in quiet conversation about the nature of divine justice, the responsibility of rulers to protect the innocent, and the courage required to stand for truth in a world that often rewards deception. The High Septon's genuine faith provides Ned with additional strength, a reminder that his fight serves principles larger than personal survival. As the first rays of sunlight begin to filter through the high windows of the Red Keep, Ned completes his preparation with a final meditation. He thinks of Catelyn, of their children, of the North he has served faithfully his entire adult life. He thinks of Jon Arryn, whose murder started this chain of events, and of Robert Baratheon, whose death made it possible. Most importantly, he thinks of his father's words about honor and the choices that define a man's character. Today, in the courtyard above, he will face whatever champion the crown provides. Win or lose, he will do so as a Stark of Winterfell, with honor as his guide and justice as his cause. The sound of approaching guards signals that the time for preparation has ended, as they unlock his cell and prepare to escort him to the trial ground. Ned stands with the quiet confidence of a man who has made peace with his choices. His body may be weakened by imprisonment, but his spirit has never been stronger. The trial by combat awaits, and with it the chance to prove that honor and truth can triumph even in the most corrupt of circumstances. As he walks toward the courtyard where his fate will be decided, Ned Stark carries with him not just his own hopes, but the hopes of everyone who still believes that justice is more than just a word spoken by those in power. The news of Ned Stark's demand for trial by combat spreads through King's Landing like ripples in a pond, touching lives in ways both expected and surprising. What begins as a political maneuver becomes something far more profound as unlikely alliances form and dormant loyalties awaken throughout the capital. In the Sept of Baelor, where the trial was first announced, the faith militant may be officially disbanded, but their spirit lives on in the hearts of the devout. Brother Lancel, a young Septon who has witnessed the growing corruption of the capital, finds himself drawn to daily prayer for the Northern Lord's success. His quiet devotion begins to inspire others among the faithful, creating a groundswell of spiritual support that surprises even the High Septon. The common people of King's Landing, long accustomed to seeing justice perverted by gold and power, begin to whisper among themselves about this lord who refuses to bend the knee to corruption. In the taverns of Flea Bottom, men who have never seen Winterfell speak of Ned Stark with respect typically reserved for legends. Women in the markets nod approvingly when his name is mentioned, remembering stories of his fair treatment of small folk and his protection of the innocent. One such woman, a baker named Merla, who has struggled to feed her children while corrupt officials demand ever higher taxes, finds herself praying to the Seven for Ned's victory. She has never met the Lord of Winterfell, but she has heard the stories of his justice, his refusal to take bribes, his concern for those who cannot protect themselves. In her small way, she begins to spread word of his honor among her neighbors. The Gold Cloaks, the city watch of King's Landing, present a more complex picture. Many serve the crown out of necessity rather than loyalty, and Ned's reputation for fairness has not gone unnoticed among their ranks. Captain Janos Slynt may be thoroughly corrupted, but his subordinates include men who remember what it means to serve justice rather than gold. Sir Jacelyn Bywater, a seasoned commander within the City Watch, finds himself torn between duty and conscience. He has heard the stories of Ned's investigation into Jon Arryn's death, his attempts to protect the realm from the corruption that has taken root in the highest levels of government. When younger guards ask his opinion about the upcoming trial, Bywater's answers are carefully neutral, but his tone suggests where his sympathies lie. The change in atmosphere extends even to the Red Keep itself. Servants who have worked in the castle for years begin to share stories of the Northern Lord's kindness during his brief tenure as Hand of the King. Unlike other nobles who treat them as furniture, Ned had acknowledged their humanity, remembered their names, shown courtesy even to the lowest scullery maid. Maester Balabar, one of the castle's junior maesters, finds himself reflecting on the principles of justice and truth that supposedly guide his order. He has watched in silence as political maneuvering and personal ambition have corrupted the very institutions meant to protect the realm. Ned's stand for honor reminds him of why he took his vows in the first place. The Northern Lord's influence extends beyond the common people to touch the hearts of some among the nobility as well. Lady Tanda Stokeworth, a minor noble who has always tried to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics without losing her integrity, finds herself quietly supporting Ned's cause. She cannot speak openly without risking her family's position, but she ensures that her household staff understand where her loyalties lie. Even among the Lannister household, cracks begin to appear in the facade of unity. Sir Kevin Lannister, Tywin's brother, and a man of greater honor than his family's reputation might suggest, begins to question whether his niece's vendetta against Ned Stark serves the realm's best interests. He keeps his doubts private, but his changed demeanor does not go unnoticed by those who know him well. The most surprising development comes from an unexpected quarter. Sandor Clegane, the Hound, finds himself deeply troubled by the prospect of Ned's trial. The scarred knight has little love for nobility in general, but he has observed Ned's genuine concern for the innocent, his protection of the weak. Unlike so many other lords who speak of honor while practicing cruelty, Ned has shown consistency between his words and actions. In the royal stables, where Sandor often retreats to find peace away from the politics of court, he encounters Ser Dontos Hollard, a knight whose life was spared by Sansa Stark's intervention. The two men, both outsiders in their own ways, find themselves sharing an unexpected bond over their respect for the Stark family's honor. "The girl saved my life," Ser Dontos says quietly, referring to Sansa's quick thinking during Joffrey's name day celebration. "Her father raised her to show mercy, even to fools like me. How can such a man be guilty of treason?" Sandor's response is characteristically blunt, but his words carry weight. He's not guilty of anything except being too honest for this cesspit of a city. But honest men don't usually survive trials by combat when the deck is stacked against them. Their conversation is overheard by others in the stables, and soon a small group of castle guards and minor knights find themselves meeting regularly to discuss the implications of Ned's trial. They cannot openly support him without risking their positions, but they can ensure that word of his character spreads through the castle's lower levels. The ripple effects extend to the noble houses visiting King's Landing. Lord Royce of Roanstone, who served alongside Ned during Robert's rebellion, finds himself torn between political pragmatism and personal loyalty. He remembers the young man who fought with honor even in the chaos of war, who protected the innocent even when it would have been easier to look away. Lady Anya Waynwood, another Vale noble, with ties to the Stark family through Jon Arryn's friendship, begins to quietly rally support among the other visiting lords. She cannot openly defy the crown, but she can ensure that stories of Ned's honor reach the right ears, that his reputation for justice is not forgotten in the political maneuvering surrounding his trial. The influence spreads even to the younger generation of nobles. Sir Loras Tyrell, the Knight of Flowers, finds himself remembering tournaments where Ned had competed with honor, never seeking glory for its own sake, but always conducting himself with dignity. The young knight's admiration for Ned's consistency begins to influence his own approach to honor and duty. In the brothels and taverns frequented by minor nobles and wealthy merchants, conversations increasingly turn to the question of justice in the realm. Ned's trial has become a symbol of something larger than one man's fate. It represents the possibility that honor might still matter, that truth might still have power in a world that seems increasingly dominated by corruption and self-interest. The faith begins to play a more active role as well. While the faith militant may be disbanded, the Septons and Septors who serve the Seven have not forgotten their duty to protect the innocent and promote justice. The High Septon's support for Ned's right to trial by combat has given permission for the faithful to hope that divine justice might yet prevail. Brother Celador, an elderly Septon who has spent decades ministering to the poor of King's Landing, finds his small sept filled with common folk seeking to pray for Ned's success. These are people who have never seen Winterfell, who know the Northern Lord only by reputation, but who recognize in him something that has been missing from their lives for too long. Even the merchants and craftsmen of the city begin to see Ned's trial as a test of whether honest dealing can triumph over corruption. Master Tabahapo Mott, the armorer who has crafted weapons for both heroes and villains, finds himself working late into the night on a special project. While he cannot openly support Ned, he can ensure that his weapons are crafted with the same integrity that the Northern Lord has shown throughout his life. The growing support network extends to unexpected places in the rookeries of the Red Keep, where ravens carry messages across the Seven Kingdoms. Maester Qyburn notices an unusual pattern in the communications. Lords throughout the realm are asking for news of Ned's trial, and their inquiries suggest a level of concern that goes beyond mere political curiosity. As the day of the trial approaches, these diverse threads of support begin to weave together into something resembling a movement. It is not organized or coordinated, but it is real, from the highest nobles to the lowest servants, from the most devout septons to the most cynical soldiers. People throughout King's Landing find themselves hoping for the same outcome. The relationships that bloom around Ned stand for justice, prove that honor is not dead in Westeros, merely dormant. His willingness to risk everything for his principles has awakened something in the hearts of those who witness it, reminding them of their own capacity for courage and integrity. In the end, the trial by combat becomes more than just a legal proceeding. It becomes a test of whether the bonds of honor and justice can still bind people together in a world that seems determined to tear such connections apart. And in the growing network of support surrounding Ned Stark, there is hope that the answer might be yes. The ravens fly day and night from King's Landing, carrying word of Ned Stark's unprecedented demand for trial by combat to every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. What begins as news of a single man's defiance becomes a catalyst for decisions that will reshape the political landscape of Westeros forever. Lords who had been content to watch events unfold from a distance suddenly find themselves compelled to choose sides, not just in a conflict between great houses, but in a deeper struggle between honor and corruption. At Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon receives the news while standing on the castle's windswept battlements, watching the sun rise over Blackwater Bay. The rightful king, as he knows himself to be, sees in Ned's trial by combat an opportunity that divine providence has placed before him. If the honorable Lord of Winterfell can prove his innocence through trial by combat, it will cast serious doubt on the legitimacy of everything Cersei and her bastard son represent. Sir Davos Seaworth stands beside his king, the former smuggler's weathered face thoughtful as he considers the implications. "My lord," he says carefully, "if Lord Stark proves his innocence, it confirms what we've long suspected about Prince Joffrey's parentage. The realm will have to face the truth about the Queen's children." Stannis nods grimly, his jaw set with determination. Indeed, and if he fails, he dies a martyr to justice, which may serve our cause even better than his survival. The king pauses, considering his next move. Send ravens to Lords Celtigar and Velaryon. Tell them we sail for King's Landing within the fortnight. If the gods grant Ned Stark victory, we must be ready to support the truth. If they do not, we must be ready to avenge it. The message spreads to Driftmark, where Lord Corlys Velaryon, the Sea Snake, receives Stannis' summons with interest. The ancient Valyrian house has always prided itself on honor and tradition, values that align more closely with Ned Stark's principles than with the corruption that has taken root in King's Landing. Lord Corlys calls his captains to prepare the fleet, sensing that great changes are coming to the Seven Kingdoms. On Claw Isle, Lord Celtigar makes similar preparations, his small but well-trained forces readying themselves for what may come. The old lord remembers Ned Stark from Robert's Rebellion, recalls his unwavering courage and his protection of the innocent. If such a man demands trial by combat to prove his innocence, then Lord Celtigar is prepared to support that cause with steel and blood if necessary. In the north, the response is swift and decisive. At Winterfell, Catelyn Stark receives increasingly urgent ravens from houses throughout the region, all pledging their support for their lord's cause. The great hall that once hosted feasts and celebrations becomes a war room where strategies are planned and alliances confirmed. Lord Rickard Karstark arrives with his sons, their faces grim but determined. "Lady Stark," he says, bowing formally. Carholt stands ready to march. will not see our Lord dishonored by southern corruption. Similar messages arrive from House Umber, where the great John himself writes in his bold hand that Last Hearth will provide 1,000 swords for Lord Stark's cause. From Bear Island, Lady Magie Mormont sends word that her fierce daughters are sharpening their blades. The mountain clans, traditionally independent and suspicious of lowland politics, send representatives to Winterfell pledging their support for the man who has always dealt with them fairly. At Riverrun, Edmure Tully calls his banners with unprecedented speed. The River Lords have always been close allies of the North through Catelyn's marriage, but Ned's trial by combat transforms what might have been a political alliance into a moral crusade. Lord Jason Mallister of Seaguard sends word that his knights are ready to ride. The Brackens and Blackwoods, eternal enemies who rarely agree on anything, both pledge their support for Lord Stark's cause. Lord Tytos Blackwood, gruff and practical, puts the situation in stark terms when he arrives at Riverrun. "This isn't about politics anymore, my lord," he tells Edmure. "It's about whether honor means anything in this realm. If they can destroy Ned Stark through lies and corruption, none of us are safe." Even in the Vale, where Lysa Arryn has kept her forces hidden behind the Bloody Gate, the noble houses begin to stir. Lord Jon Royce of Runestone, called Bronze Jon for his ancient armor, remembers serving alongside Ned during Robert's rebellion. The old lord calls a gathering of Vale nobles at Runestone, where passionate discussions about honor and duty continue late into the night. Lady Anya Waynwood, whose house has always valued tradition and justice, speaks eloquently about the debt the Vale owes to Ned Stark. "He stood by Jon Arryn through every trial," she reminds the assembled lords. "When our lord was murdered, it was Ned Stark who sought justice. Can we do less for him now?" The influence spreads even to houses that have no direct connection to the Starks. In the Stormlands, where Robert Baratheon's memory still commands respect, Lord Selwyn Tarth of Evenfall Hall finds himself remembering the young Ned Stark, who had been Robert's closest friend. The Lord of Tarth begins quietly reaching out to other Stormlords, gauging their support for Stannis' claim, and by extension for Ned's cause. In the Reach, the situation becomes more complex. Lord Mace Tyrell officially supports King Joffrey, but many of his bannermen harbor doubts about the boy king's legitimacy. Lord Randil Tarly, one of the finest military minds in the Seven Kingdoms, finds himself torn between political expedience and personal honor. He remembers Ned Stark as a competent and honorable commander during Robert's rebellion, a man who could be trusted to keep his word even when it cost him dearly. The response from Dorne surprises many observers. Prince Doran Martell, the Red Viper's older brother, has little reason to love the Starks, but he has even less reason to love the Lannisters. The murder of his sister Elia and her children during the sack of King's Landing remains an open wound. If Ned Stark's trial by combat can expose Lannister corruption, it might create opportunities for Dorne to seek the justice they have long been denied. Prince Oberyn himself, when reached by his brother's ravens, responds with characteristic intensity. "Let the wolf prove his innocence," he writes from wherever his wanderings have taken him. If he succeeds, it proves that the gods still care about justice. If he fails, it proves that the Lannisters will stop at nothing to protect their lies. Either outcome serves our purposes. The Iron Islands present a different kind of response. Balon Greyjoy, ever the opportunist, sees in the mainland's political chaos a chance to advance his own ambitions for independence. But even among the Ironborn, there are those who remember Ned Stark's fairness during his visit to Pike. As Robert's representative, Roderick Harlaw, called the Reader for his unusual love of books and learning, begins to correspond quietly with mainland houses, sensing that great changes are coming to Westeros. The response extends beyond the great houses to the various orders and institutions of the realm. The Maesters of the Citadel find themselves divided in their response. Some, particularly the younger ones, are inspired by Ned's stand for truth and justice. They remember their vows to serve the realm, not just the powerful, and they begin to question whether their order has become too comfortable with political compromise. Archmaester Marwyn, known for his unconventional views, writes to colleagues throughout the Seven Kingdoms, suggesting that the trial by combat represents something significant for their order. We serve truth, he reminds them, not convenience. If we cannot support a man who risks everything for truth, what does that say about our oaths? The faith of the Seven experiences its own awakening. The High Septon's support for Ned's right to trial by combat has given permission for Septons and Septors throughout the realm to speak more openly about justice and righteousness. In septs from Old Town to White Harbor, prayers are offered for the Northern Lord's success, and sermons increasingly focus on the importance of standing up to corruption. The Night's Watch, bound by ancient oaths to take no part in the politics of the realm, finds itself in a delicate position. Lord Commander Jorah Mormont officially maintains neutrality, but privately he remembers Ned Stark as one of the few Southern lords who truly understood the importance of the Wall. The Old Bear allows rangers like Yoren to make their own choices about supporting their former lord, as long as they maintain their vows to the Watch. At Eastwatch by the Sea, Cotter Pike receives word of the trial with grim satisfaction. The gruff commander has little patience for Southern politics, but he respects men who stand by their principles. Similarly, at the Shadow Tower, Ser Danis Mallister finds himself quietly hoping for Ned's success, knowing that the Night's Watch needs allies who understand their mission. The response from the faith extends to the Silent Sisters, the women who prepare the dead for burial. Though they take vows of silence, their presence at Ned's trial becomes a form of quiet support, a reminder that even in death, honor and justice matter. Merchants throughout the Seven Kingdoms find themselves taking sides as well. The Iron Bank of Bravos, through their representatives in Westeros, begins to watch events with increased interest. They have always preferred dealing with honorable men who pay their debts, and Ned Stark's reputation for integrity has not gone unnoticed. If the political situation in Westeros becomes unstable, the Iron Bank wants allies they can trust. Even the various sellsword companies operating in the Eastern Kingdoms receive word of the trial. Many of their members are Westerosi exiles who retain some connection to their homeland. The Second Sons, the Brave Companions, and other companies find their members debating the implications of Ned's stand for honor in a world that increasingly values only gold and power. As news of the trial spreads across the Narrow Sea, it reaches Daenerys Targaryen in the Dothraki Sea. The young Dragon Queen, still learning to rule and still planning her eventual return to Westeros, listens to her advisors discuss the implications. Ser Jorah Mormont, whose father serves as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, speaks passionately about Ned Stark's character and honor. "If you truly wish to rule justly, Your Grace," Ser Jorah counsels, "you could do worse than to model yourself on Ned Stark's example. He may serve a usurper in your eyes, but he serves with honor and integrity. Those are qualities that command genuine loyalty." The response from across the known world demonstrates that Ned's stand for justice has touched something fundamental in human nature. From the frozen wall to the burning deserts of Dorne, from the Iron Islands to the free cities across the Narrow Sea, people are forced to confront the question of whether honor and truth still matter in a world that seems increasingly corrupt. As the day of the trial approaches, the Seven Kingdoms find themselves more divided than they have been since Robert's Rebellion. But this time, the division is not primarily about competing claims to the throne. It is about competing visions of what the realm should be, whether justice is more than just a word spoken by those in power, and whether one man's courage can inspire a kingdom to remember its better nature. The response has been swift, decisive, and largely supportive of the Northern Lord's cause. Whatever happens in the trial by combat, Westeros will never be quite the same. Ned Stark's demand for justice has awakened forces that have been dormant for too long. and the realm stands on the brink of changes that will echo through generations to come. Even as support for Ned Stark grows throughout the Seven Kingdoms, the forces of corruption and self-interest do not remain idle. Queen Cersei, faced with the collapse of her carefully laid plans, begins a desperate campaign to ensure that justice does not prevail in the upcoming trial by combat. Her green eyes blaze with fury as she realizes that her enemy has turned her own trap against her, using the very laws she thought would destroy him as a shield. In her solar, surrounded by the luxury that has always defined her world, Cersei paces like a caged lioness, while her advisors scramble to find solutions to this unexpected crisis. The Queen's golden hair catches the morning light streaming through tall windows, but her beauty cannot disguise the cold calculation in her expression. She had counted on Ned's honor being his weakness, never imagining it might become his salvation. "Find me Ser Gregor," she commands Lord Tywin's man, but the response disappoints her. The mountain is in the Riverlands, burning and pillaging in a campaign that now seems pointless given the changed circumstances. Even if ravens could reach him in time, the journey back to King's Landing would take too long. The trial cannot be delayed indefinitely without making the crown appear weak. Grand Maester Pycelle shuffles forward, his ancient hands trembling as he offers his counsel. "Your Grace, perhaps we might question the validity of the trial itself. Surely a confessed traitor has forfeited his right to such proceedings." But even the old Maester's voice lacks conviction. The law is clear, and the High Septon has already confirmed Ned's right to trial by combat. Cersei's frustration boils over as she contemplates her limited options. Sir Meryn Trant is competent but hardly legendary. Sir Boros Blount grows slower each year, more suited to guarding hallways than fighting for his life. The Hound remains unpredictable, his loyalty to the crown questionable at best. None of them inspire confidence when facing a swordsman of Ned Stark's reputation. The Queen's desperation leads her to consider increasingly dangerous alternatives. She sends discreet messages to sellswords and hedge knights throughout the capital, seeking someone who might serve as champion without asking too many questions about the justice of their cause. Gold flows freely as she attempts to buy the kind of loyalty that cannot be commanded through law or tradition. Bronn, the sellsword who has begun serving Tyrion Lannister, receives one such approach. The scarred warrior listens to the offer with interest but ultimately declines, sensing that the political winds are shifting in ways that make Ned Stark's cause more attractive than Lannister gold. His refusal represents a significant problem for the Queen, as word spreads among the sellsword community that even mercenaries are beginning to question the crown's position. Meanwhile, Ned faces his own challenges in preparing for the trial. His weeks of imprisonment have taken a toll on his body that cannot be completely overcome in a few days of preparation. The muscle memory remains, the techniques learned over decades of training and combat, but his physical condition is far from optimal. He must find ways to compensate for his weakened state while maximizing the advantages his experience provides. The choice of whether to fight personally or name a champion weighs heavily on his mind. Honor suggests he should face his accuser's champion himself, proving his innocence through his own courage and skill. Pragmatism suggests that naming a younger, stronger champion might better serve his family's interests and the cause of justice itself. Brother Lancel, the young Septon who has become one of Ned's most vocal supporters among the faith, visits the Black Cells to offer spiritual counsel. The earnest young man speaks passionately about the importance of Ned's stand, but he also raises difficult questions about the morality of risking everything on a single combat when so many depend on the outcome. "My lord," Brother Lancel says carefully, "your cause serves something larger than personal honor. If naming a champion would better serve justice, would it not be the wiser choice? The gods work through many instruments, not just our own swords." The suggestion troubles Ned, not because it lacks merit, but because it forces him to confront the tension between personal honor and broader responsibility. He has spent his entire life believing that a man must stand behind his convictions personally, but the stakes of this trial extend far beyond his own fate. The search for a suitable champion, should Ned choose that path, presents its own difficulties. Few knights of proven skill are both available and willing to risk their lives for a man branded as a traitor by the crown. The political ramifications of supporting Ned publicly could destroy careers and endanger families, making recruitment a delicate and dangerous process. Sir Barristan Selmy, the legendary knight of the Kingsguard, finds himself torn between duty and conscience. The old knight has served faithfully for decades, but he has also observed Ned's character during his brief tenure as Hand of the King. In private moments, Sir Barristan questions whether serving an unjust crown truly fulfills his oath to protect the innocent and defend the realm. The White Knight's internal struggle becomes apparent to those who know him well. His fellow Kingsguard members notice his distraction during their duties, his tendency to stare thoughtfully at nothing during quiet moments. When pressed by Ser Jaime about his unusual behavior, Sir Barristan's responses are carefully neutral, but his discomfort is obvious. Tyrion Lannister faces his own challenges as he attempts to provide subtle assistance to Ned's cause without openly betraying his family. The dwarf's sharp mind works constantly to find ways to help justice prevail while maintaining his precarious position within the Lannister power structure. His efforts to gather information about potential champions and fighting conditions must be conducted with extreme discretion. The younger Lannister's growing support for Ned's cause does not go unnoticed by his sister. Cersei's suspicions about Tyrion's loyalties lead to increasingly tense confrontations between the siblings. During one particularly heated exchange in the Tower of the Hand, accusations fly freely as the Queen questions her brother's commitment to family interests. "You always did have a soft spot for lost causes," Cersei sneers, her voice dripping with contempt. "But this time your misplaced sympathy could destroy us all. The dwarf's folly may cost our family everything we've worked to build." Tyrion's response is characteristically sharp, but beneath his wit lies genuine conviction. Perhaps what we've built deserves to be destroyed if it can only survive through injustice and murder. Some things are more important than family pride, sister. The exchange illustrates the growing divisions within the Lannister family itself. Sir Kevan, observing these conflicts from his position as Tywin's brother and trusted advisor, begins to question whether the family's current path serves their long-term interests. The Honorable Knight has always tried to temper his brother's ruthlessness with wisdom, but the situation with Ned Stark tests his diplomatic skills to their limits. Religious complications add another layer of difficulty to the preparations. While the High Septon officially supports Ned's right to trial by combat, not all members of the faith hierarchy share his enthusiasm for this particular application of divine justice. Some Septons, particularly those who have grown comfortable with the current political arrangement, quietly work to undermine support for the Northern Lord's cause. Septon Torbert, an ambitious cleric who has long curried favor with powerful nobles, begins spreading doubts about the wisdom of the trial. In private conversations with wealthy merchants and minor lords, he suggests that Ned's demand for trial by combat represents dangerous precedent that could destabilize the realm's legal foundations. These religious divisions create uncertainty among the faithful, particularly those who lack the education to interpret complex theological and legal questions for themselves. The common people who initially supported Ned's cause begin to hear conflicting messages from different religious authorities, leading to confusion and doubt about the righteousness of his position. The physical preparation for the trial itself presents logistical challenges that reflect the political tensions surrounding the event. The choice of location, weapons, and specific rules must be negotiated between parties who trust each other very little. Every detail becomes a potential point of contention as both sides seek advantages while maintaining the appearance of fairness. Sir Villain Payne, the royal executioner who would have carried out Ned's death sentence, finds himself in the awkward position of potentially overseeing a trial that could prove the condemned man's innocence. The Silent Knight's presence serves as a constant reminder of what will happen if the trial goes badly, adding psychological pressure to an already tense situation. The growing media attention, if such a term can be applied to the spread of news in medieval times, creates additional complications. Minstrels and traveling storytellers begin incorporating the upcoming trial into their performances, often taking creative liberties with the facts. These embellished accounts spread faster than official news, creating public expectations that may not match reality. The economic implications of the trial begin to manifest as merchants and craftsmen throughout King's Landing place bets on the outcome. The gambling creates its own pressures, as people with financial interests in the result begin to look for ways to influence events. Rumors of attempts to bribe guards, tamper with weapons, or otherwise corrupt the proceedings add paranoia to an already charged atmosphere. International observers from across the Narrow Sea begin to take interest in the proceedings as well. Representatives from the free cities see in Ned's trial a test of Westerosi commitment to justice and law. Their assessments could influence future trade relationships and diplomatic arrangements, adding another layer of consequence to what might otherwise be seen as a purely domestic matter. As the trial date approaches, these various challenges and complications create an atmosphere of barely controlled chaos around what should be a straightforward legal proceeding. The simple question of guilt or innocence has become entangled with broader issues of political legitimacy, religious authority, family loyalty, and international reputation. Yet through all these difficulties, the core issue remains unchanged. Ned Stark has demanded trial by combat to prove his innocence of treason charges that many believe to be false. Whatever complications surround the trial, whatever political machinations attempt to influence its outcome, the fundamental test remains the same. Can honor and truth triumph over corruption and lies when given a fair chance to compete? The challenges facing this test of justice are real and significant, but they also reveal the depth of support that Ned's stand has generated throughout the realm. Even as his enemies work to undermine him, unexpected allies emerge to offer assistance. The very intensity of the opposition demonstrates the threat that his success would pose to those who benefit from the current system of corruption and abuse. In the end, the challenges in Paradise serve to clarify what is truly at stake in this trial by combat. It is not just the life of one Northern Lord, but the soul of the Seven Kingdoms itself. Dawn breaks over King's Landing with an unusual stillness, as if the city itself holds its breath in anticipation of what is to come. The trial by combat that will determine not just Ned Stark's fate, but the very nature of justice in the Seven Kingdoms is finally at hand. In the courtyard of the Red Keep, preparations have been completed under the watchful eyes of both supporters and enemies of the Northern Lord's cause. The fighting ground has been carefully prepared according to ancient tradition. A circle of packed earth 40 feet across has been marked with white sand. Weapon racks stand ready with an array of swords, shields, and armor, all inspected by representatives of both sides to ensure fairness. The High Septon himself oversees these preparations, his presence lending religious authority to proceedings that have taken on significance far beyond a simple legal trial. Queen Cersei arrives with her retinue as the sun climbs higher, her green silk gown a stark contrast to the martial atmosphere of the courtyard. Her face shows the strain of the past days, the desperate search for a champion who could guarantee victory over Ned Stark, having yielded no satisfactory solution. Beside her, King Joffrey fidgets with barely contained excitement, his cruel nature anticipating bloodshed regardless of which man falls. The crown's champion has finally been selected, though not without considerable difficulty. Sir Meryn Trant stands ready in his plate armor, his face grim behind his helm's visor. The Kingsguard Knight knows his reputation will be defined by this fight, but he also understands the political necessity of his role. Win or lose, he serves the crown's interests by preventing any appearance that justice has been denied. On the opposite side of the courtyard, Ned Stark emerges from the Red Keep's depths with quiet dignity. The weeks of imprisonment have marked him, his face thinner and his hair showing more gray, but his bearing remains that of a lord who has never compromised his principles. He has chosen to fight for himself, deciding that honor demands he personally prove his innocence rather than asking another to risk death in his place. The crowd that has gathered to witness this trial represents every level of King's Landing society. Great lords and common folk stand side by side, united in their fascination with this test of justice. Many faces show hope, others fear, but all understand they are witnessing something that will be remembered for generations to come. Brother Lancel stands among the Septons who have come to observe, his young face earnest with prayer for divine justice. Beside him, other members of the faith maintain their own silent vigils, asking the Seven to guide the outcome according to righteousness rather than mere strength of arms. Their presence serves as a reminder that this trial has spiritual as well as legal significance. Tyrion Lannister watches from a position near the royal party, his face carefully neutral despite his inner turmoil. The dwarf has done everything in his power to ensure fairness without openly betraying his family, but now he can only observe as events unfold beyond his ability to influence. His sharp eyes miss nothing as both fighters make their final preparations. Sir Barristan Selmy stands with his fellow Kingsguard, but his legendary skills will not be tested today. The old knight's internal conflict between duty and conscience shows clearly on his weathered face as he watches Ned Stark prepare for battle. Part of him wishes he could offer counsel to the Northern Lord, sharing the wisdom gained through decades of combat experience. As the formal proceedings begin, the High Septon calls for silence and speaks the traditional words that govern trial by combat. His voice carries clearly across the courtyard as he invokes the authority of the Seven to guide the outcome according to divine justice. The ancient ritual adds solemnity to what might otherwise be seen as simple violence. "Let the gods decide the truth," the High Septon declares, his words echoing off the stone walls of the Red Keep. "Let the innocent be protected and the guilty face judgment. Let justice be done according to the will of the Seven." Ned steps into the circle with the calm confidence of a man who has made peace with his choices. He has selected a bastard sword similar to ice in weight and balance, though lacking his ancestral blade's Valyrian steel. His armor is simple but well made, offering protection without sacrificing mobility. Every movement speaks of decades of training and experience in combat. Sir Meryn enters from the opposite side, his heavier armor gleaming in the morning sunlight. The Kingsguard knight carries sword and shield, a more defensive approach that suggests he plans to outlast rather than overwhelm his opponent. His style reflects his training as a protector rather than a tournament champion, practical but unspectacular. The contrast between the two men becomes immediately apparent as they face each other across the circle. Ned represents the old values of honor and duty that built the Seven Kingdoms, while Sir Meryn embodies the political expedience and moral compromise that have corrupted those same institutions. Their combat will test which approach proves stronger when all pretense is stripped away. The High Septon raises his hand and then brings it down sharply, the signal for combat to begin. The crowd falls silent, except for the whispered prayers of the faithful and the barely audible breathing of those who lean forward to see every detail of the fight. Ned moves first, not with the reckless charge some might expect, but with the measured advance of an experienced warrior assessing his opponent. His sword comes up in a classic guard position as he studies Sir Meryn's stance and movement, looking for weaknesses to exploit. The Northern Lord's approach shows the patience that has served him well throughout his life. Sir Meryn responds cautiously, raising his shield and keeping his sword ready for either attack or defense. The Kingsguard knight knows his opponent's reputation and shows appropriate respect for Ned's skills. His strategy appears to focus on wearing down the weakened lord rather than seeking a quick victory through aggressive action. The first exchange of blows comes when Ned tests Ser Meryn's defenses with a series of quick strikes. The Northern Lord's sword rings against the knight's shield and armor, drawing sparks but not blood. The attack serves its purpose of measuring his opponent's speed and reflexes while concealing his own tactical intentions. Ser Meryn's counterattack comes immediately, his sword sweeping toward Ned's side in a powerful cut designed to end the fight quickly. But the Northern Lord's experience shows as he turns the blade aside with his own weapon, the steel ringing loud enough to be heard throughout the courtyard. The exchange demonstrates that both fighters possess genuine skill despite the political nature of their conflict. The combat settles into a pattern of careful advance and cautious retreat, as each man seeks advantage without exposing himself to decisive counterattack. Ned's superior experience begins to show as he consistently positions himself where his opponent's shield provides less protection, forcing Ser Meryn to adjust his stance repeatedly. Minutes pass with neither fighter gaining clear advantage, but subtle signs begin to favor the Northern Lord. His breathing remains controlled while Ser Meryn shows increasing strain from carrying heavier armor in the growing heat of the morning sun. The political implications of a prolonged fight begin to work against the crown's champion. The turning point comes when Ned deliberately creates an opening in his guard, inviting Ser Meryn to commit to an attack that will leave the knight exposed. The King's Guard takes the bait, stepping forward with a powerful thrust aimed at Ned's chest. But the opening was calculated, and the Northern Lord's response comes with the precision of decades of training. Ned's sword deflects Ser Meryn's thrust while simultaneously striking the knight's sword hand with the pommel of his weapon. The impact numbs Ser Meryn's fingers enough to weaken his grip, creating the opportunity Ned has been waiting for throughout the fight. The crowd gasps as they see the shift in momentum. What follows happens with the brutal efficiency that marks the difference between a politician in armor and a true warrior. Ned's follow-up attack comes in 3 parts, each building on the last. First, his sword crashes into Ser Meryn's shield with enough force to drive the knight backward. Second, he steps inside the knight's guard, where the longer sword becomes a disadvantage. Third, his knee drives upward into Ser Meryn's gut with crushing force. Ser Meryn doubles over, his breath driven from his lungs by the impact. His sword wavers in his weakened grip as he struggles to maintain his guard. Ned steps back, giving his opponent a moment to recover, showing the mercy that has always marked his character. The gesture draws murmurs of approval from the watching crowd. "Yield," Ned says quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "You have fought with honor, sir. There is no shame in yielding to preserve your life." But Ser Meryn, whether from pride or fear of the Queen's displeasure, shakes his head and raises his sword again. The knight's breathing is labored, and his stance unsteady, but he refuses to concede defeat. His choice forces Ned to finish what political necessity has begun. The final exchange comes quickly. Ser Meryn launches a desperate attack, putting his remaining strength behind a wild swing that would be devastating if it connected. But desperation makes for poor technique, and Ned sidesteps the clumsy assault with ease. His counterstrike comes with the inevitability of justice finally served. Ned's sword finds the gap between Ser Meryn's helm and gorget, the point coming to rest against the knight's throat with just enough pressure to draw a thin line of blood. The fight ends not with dramatic death, but with quiet surrender, Ser Meryn's sword falling from nerveless fingers as he accepts his defeat. "I yield," the knight gasps, his voice barely audible. "The gods have spoken." The courtyard erupts in cheers from those who have supported Ned's cause, while others stand in stunned silence at the outcome. Queen Cersei's face shows a mixture of rage and disbelief as she watches her carefully laid plans crumble into ruins. King Joffrey stamps his feet in frustration, denied the spectacle of blood he had anticipated. The High Septon steps forward, his voice ringing with authority as he pronounces the verdict that divine justice has rendered. The gods have spoken through trial by combat. Lord Eddard Stark is innocent of the charges brought against him. Let no man question the righteousness of this judgment. Ned removes his helm and looks toward the royal party, his grey eyes meeting Queen Cersei's green ones across the courtyard. In that moment, the true implications of his victory become clear to everyone present. If he is innocent of treason, then his investigation into Jon Arryn's death was justified. If his investigation was justified, then the questions he raised about royal legitimacy must be taken seriously. Tyrion steps forward from the crowd, his face showing genuine relief at the outcome. Despite the political difficulties this victory will create for his family, the dwarf cannot hide his satisfaction at seeing justice prevail over corruption. His movement signals to others that even among the Lannisters, some recognize the righteousness of Ned's cause. Brother Lancel and his fellow Septons begin singing a hymn of thanksgiving, their voices rising in praise of divine justice. The song spreads through the crowd as others join in, creating a moment of spiritual unity that transcends the political divisions that have marked the trial's preparation. As Ned is freed from his chains and his sword returned to him, the full scope of what has just occurred begins to sink in throughout the assembled crowd. The Honorable Lord of Winterfell has not merely survived his trial by combat, he has vindicated everything he represents. Honor has triumphed over corruption, truth over lies, justice over political expedience. The alternative climax proves that in this timeline, the gods still care about righteousness, and that courage in defense of truth can overcome even the most corrupt opposition. The ripples of this victory will spread far beyond the walls of the Red Keep, changing the fate of the Seven Kingdoms in ways both expected and surprising. In the end, the trial by combat becomes exactly what Ned hoped it would be, a chance for justice to prove itself stronger than the forces arrayed against it. The alternative climax shows a world where honor still matters, where good men can still triumph, and where the courage to stand for truth can literally save a kingdom from the corruption that threatens to destroy it. In the days that follow Ned Stark's victory and trial by combat, the Seven Kingdoms undergo transformations that would have been unimaginable just weeks before. The vindication of the Honorable Lord of Winterfell creates ripple effects that touch every corner of the realm, establishing new precedents for justice and governance that will shape the future for generations to come. King's Landing itself becomes the epicenter of these changes. With Ned proven innocent of treason charges, his investigation into Jon Arryn's death gains new legitimacy and urgency. The questions he raised about royal succession can no longer be dismissed as the ravings of a traitor. Queen Cersei finds herself in an increasingly precarious position as lords throughout the realm begin to openly question the legitimacy of King Joffrey's claim to the Iron Throne. The immediate aftermath of the trial sees Ned restored to his position as Hand of the King, though the political landscape has shifted dramatically since his imprisonment. The man who returns to the Tower of the Hand is tempered by his experience in the Black Cells, more cautious perhaps, but also more determined to see justice done regardless of the personal cost. His first act as restored Hand involves calling for a formal investigation into the circumstances surrounding Jon Arryn's death. With the authority of his office restored and the moral weight of his trial by combat victory behind him, Ned begins assembling evidence that will eventually expose the truth about the royal children's parentage. The investigation proceeds with the methodical thoroughness that has always characterized his approach to governance. Tyrion Lannister finds himself in an unprecedented position as his family's interests and his personal conscience align for perhaps the first time in his life. The dwarf's assistance to Ned's cause during the trial has not gone unnoticed, and his willingness to support justice over family loyalty earns him respect from unexpected quarters. When approached by Ned about serving as an intermediary with his family, Tyrion accepts the role with genuine enthusiasm. The restoration of honest governance to the capital creates opportunities for addressing problems that have festered under corrupt leadership. The City Watch undergoes significant reforms as honest men replace those who served only gold rather than justice. Captain Janos Seiland finds himself under investigation for his role in various corrupt schemes, while officers like Sir Jacelyn Bywater receive promotions based on merit rather than political connections. The Faith experiences a renaissance of sorts as the High Septon's support for Ned's trial validates the importance of religious authority in temporal matters. Septons throughout the realm find renewed purpose in speaking truth to power, while the common people rediscover respect for religious institutions that have proven willing to stand up for justice. The Faith militant may remain officially disbanded, but the spiritual militancy that drove that organization finds new expression in peaceful but determined advocacy for righteousness. Brother Lancel becomes a symbol of this renewed faith, his passionate support for Ned's cause inspiring other young Septons to embrace more active roles in promoting social justice. The earnest young man's sermons draw increasingly large crowds as people hunger for religious leadership that addresses real moral issues rather than abstract theological debates. In the north, Catelyn Stark receives news of her husband's victory with joy tempered by awareness of the challenges still ahead. The army that Robb had assembled to march south for rescue now transforms into a force for supporting justice and legitimate governance. The young wolf proves his political maturity by redirecting his military preparations towards supporting his father's reformed administration rather than seeking revenge against the Lannisters. The Northern Lords who had rallied to their liege's cause find themselves part of something larger than a simple rescue mission. Lord Rickard Karstark speaks for many when he declares that the North will stand behind any effort to restore honor to the realm's governance. The mountain clans, traditional skeptics of southern politics, pledge continued support for a cause that has proven the value of their trust. Winterfell itself becomes a hub of communication as ravens fly constantly between the north and the capital. Catelyn coordinates with her husband's efforts while managing the complex logistics of supporting his reforms from hundreds of miles away. Her experience in governance proves invaluable as she helps establish the networks of communication and support that will sustain the changes Ned implements. The Riverlands experience similar transformations as Edmure Tully commits his house fully to supporting the new order emerging from King's Landing. The Riverlords who had pledged support during the trial find their loyalty rewarded with inclusion in the broader effort to reform the realm's governance. Trade along the rivers increases as honest administration reduces the corruption that had previously plagued commerce. Lord Jason Mallister of Seaguard uses his maritime connections to build support for Ned's cause among the merchant houses of the Free Cities. The vindication of honest governance in Westeros appeals to traders who prefer dealing with reliable partners rather than corrupt officials whose loyalties shift with political winds. Even the ancient rivalry between the Brackens and Blackwoods finds new focus as both houses unite behind shared values of honor and justice. Their traditional conflicts seem petty compared to the larger struggle between righteousness and corruption that has emerged from Ned's trial. Young knights from both houses volunteer to serve in King's Landing, eager to be part of the restoration of honest governance. At Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon finds his position significantly strengthened by Ned's victory. The Lord of Winterfell's vindication validates many of the concerns Stannis has raised about his nephew's legitimacy. Ravens fly between Dragonstone and King's Landing as the two men coordinate their efforts to address the constitutional crisis created by questions about royal succession. Sir Davos Seaworth proves instrumental in these negotiations, his common-sense approach helping bridge the gap between Stannis' rigid adherence to law and Ned's more flexible interpretation of duty. The former smuggler's respect for both men's integrity makes him an ideal intermediary as they work together to find solutions that serve justice without plunging the realm into civil war. The Vale begins to emerge from its isolation as Lord Yorn Royce leads a faction of nobles who advocate for more active involvement in realm politics. Ned's victory has demonstrated that honor can still triumph over corruption, inspiring the Vale Lords to risk their traditional neutrality in support of justice. While Lady Lysa continues to resist leaving the Eyrie, her influence over Vale politics weakens as more lords choose involvement over isolation. Lady Anya Waynwood becomes a key figure in this transformation, using her house's reputation for honor to rally support for Ned's cause among the smaller houses of the Vale. Her correspondence with other noble ladies throughout the realm helps build a network of support that transcends traditional political boundaries. In the Reach, the situation becomes more complex as House Tyrell attempts to navigate between their official support for King Joffrey and the growing evidence of his illegitimacy. Lord Mace Tyrell finds himself under increasing pressure from his more honorable bannermen to distance the house from obvious corruption. The internal debates within the Reach's nobility reflect the broader constitutional questions that Ned's victory has forced the entire realm to confront. Lord Randyll Tarly emerges as a voice for pragmatic support of legitimate governance, his military reputation lending weight to arguments for accepting the evidence that Ned's investigation produces. The stern lord's willingness to put duty to the realm above political convenience influences other Reach houses to reconsider their positions. Dorne's response proves particularly significant, as Prince Doran Martell sees opportunity in the chaos surrounding questions of royal legitimacy. The careful prince begins subtle negotiations with Ned's representatives, exploring the possibility of justice for Princess Elia's murder if the Lannister hold-on power weakens sufficiently. Prince Oberyn's enthusiasm for any opportunity to strike at the Lannisters makes him a valuable ally in these delicate discussions. The Night's Watch finds itself in an unusual position of strength, as Lord Commander Jorah Mormont receives assurances of continued support from the reformed administration in King's Landing. Ned's understanding of the Wall's importance ensures that resources and recruits continue to flow north, even as political upheaval affects other aspects of governance. The international implications of Ned's victory extend across the Narrow Sea as well. The Iron Bank of Bravos expresses increased confidence in Westeros as a reliable partner, the restoration of honest governance, promising more predictable and honorable dealings in future financial arrangements. Representatives from other free cities begin exploring expanded trade relationships with a realm that appears to be returning to principled leadership. Daenerys Targaryen, still far from ready to reclaim her birthright, finds the political situation in Westeros increasingly complex as reports reach her of the constitutional crisis surrounding royal legitimacy. Ser Jorah's counsel about Ned's character proves prescient as the young Dragon Queen considers what kind of ruler she wants to become when she eventually returns to the Seven Kingdoms. The cultural changes that emerge from this new legacy extend beyond politics to affect art, literature, and social customs throughout the realm. Minstrels begin composing songs that celebrate honor and justice rather than cynical political maneuvering. The stories told in taverns and great halls increasingly focus on the possibility of good triumphing over evil rather than the inevitability of corruption. The education of young nobles begins to emphasize different values as houses throughout the realm recognize the importance of raising children who understand the true meaning of honor and duty. The example of Ned's willingness to risk everything for his principles becomes a standard against which young knights and ladies measure their own choices. Religious instruction similarly evolves to emphasize the practical application of spiritual principles rather than abstract theological debates. The faith's role in supporting Ned's trial by combat demonstrates the relevance of religious authority to contemporary governance, inspiring renewed interest in the moral foundations of political power. The legal system itself undergoes significant reforms as the precedent of Ned's trial by combat reinforces the importance of allowing justice to take its course regardless of political pressure. Courts throughout the realm begin to operate with greater independence. Judges and magistrates, emboldened by the example of divine justice triumphing over corruption. Trade and commerce benefit enormously from the restoration of honest governance, as merchants and craftsmen no longer need to factor corruption into their business calculations. The economic growth that results from reduced graft and increased predictability in legal proceedings creates prosperity that extends to all levels of society. The legacy that emerges from Ned's victory proves that single acts of courage can indeed change the course of history. His willingness to risk everything for his principles has created a foundation for reforms that will benefit the Seven Kingdoms for generations to come. The alternative timeline shows a world where honor is not just a word, but a living principle that guides governance and inspires citizens to demand better from their leaders. In the end, the new legacy demonstrates that justice delayed is not necessarily justice denied, and that sometimes the courage to stand for truth can literally save a kingdom from the corruption that threatens to destroy it. The Seven Kingdoms enter a new era, one defined not by the cynical pursuit of power, but by the recognition that legitimate authority must be based on honor, justice, and genuine service to the realm. Years have passed since that fateful morning, when Ned Stark's sword rang against Sir Meryn Trant in the courtyard of the Red Keep, and the Seven Kingdoms have been transformed by the choices made in that moment of truth. The realm that emerges from the constitutional crisis sparked by his trial by combat bears little resemblance to the corrupt and cynical place it once was, shaped instead by the principles of honor and justice that his victory validated. At Winterfell, the Great Hall glows with warmth as the Stark family gathers for the evening meal, a scene that would have been impossible in the original timeline, where death and separation had torn them apart. Ned sits at the head of the high table, his hair now silver, but his bearing still strong, surrounded by children and grandchildren whose very existence testifies to the power of the choices he made years ago. Catelyn sits beside him, her beauty matured into the dignified grace of a woman who has seen her deepest fears transformed into unexpected joy. The years of separation and worry that marked their marriage in another timeline have been replaced by a deeper partnership forged through shared trials and ultimate triumph. Their love, tested by political crisis and strengthened by mutual respect, has become a foundation upon which not just their family but their entire region has prospered. Robb enters the hall with his own family, his wife Jane Westerling at his side, and their children trailing behind them like a pack of young wolves. The marriage that began as a political alliance in the aftermath of the constitutional crisis has grown into genuine affection between two people who share a commitment to honor and service. Their eldest son, named Eddard in honor of his grandfather, shows promise of inheriting the Stark dedication to justice that has become legendary throughout the realm. Sansa arrives from King's Landing, where she serves as one of Queen Marjorie's ladies-in-waiting, her experiences in the capital having shaped her into a woman of both beauty and political acumen. The marriage alliance with House Tyrell that emerged from the political realignments following Joffrey's removal from the throne has proven beneficial for both the North and the Reach. Her betrothal to Loras Tyrell represents not just a political union, but a genuine meeting of minds between two people who value honor and courtesy. The trauma and abuse that marked Sansa's original timeline have been replaced by education in statecraft and diplomacy that has prepared her to be a true partner in governance rather than merely a political pawn. Her letters to Winterfell speak of her joy in serving a queen who values wisdom and justice, and of her excitement about her upcoming wedding to a knight whose reputation for honor matches her family's own values. Arya bursts through the doors with characteristic energy, fresh from her training with Syrio Forel, who now serves as Master-at-Arms for Winterfell. The Dancing Master's survival and eventual journey north represent one of the many small miracles that became possible when Ned's victory changed the political landscape of the capital. Arya's training in swordplay continues, but it is tempered by education in languages, mathematics, and statecraft that prepare her for whatever role she chooses to play in the world. The fierce independence that defines Arya has found positive expression in this timeline, where her family's survival has given her the security to explore her interests without the desperate edge that marked her original journey. She speaks excitedly of her correspondence with Princess Shireen Baratheon, who shares her love of learning, and of her plans to visit the free cities as part of her education in the wider world. Bran sits at the table with his own children gathered around him, the legs that work perfectly in this timeline having carried him on adventures throughout the North and beyond. His capacity for leadership, evident even in childhood, has been nurtured through years of peace and education that prepared him to serve as his father's representative in dealing with the mountain clans and other traditional allies of House Stark. The mystical abilities that might have defined him in another timeline remain present but undeveloped, his life following a more conventional path of marriage, children, and service to his house and region. His wife, a daughter of House Mormont, shares his love of the wild places of the North, and their children show promise of continuing the Stark tradition of understanding both the civilized and natural worlds. Rickon, no longer the forgotten youngest son of a scattered family, has grown into a young man whose easy laughter and quick wit make him beloved throughout Winterfell. His education has been supplemented by extensive travel throughout the Seven Kingdoms, making him perhaps the most cosmopolitan of the Stark children while retaining his deep connection to Northern values and traditions. Jon Snow's fate in this timeline represents perhaps the most dramatic transformation of all, legitimized by royal decree in recognition of his service during the political crisis that followed Ned's trial. Jon Stark now serves as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch by choice rather than exile. His marriage to Ygritte, sanctioned by the reformed policies regarding the Watch's celibacy requirements, has produced children who represent the next generation of defenders of the realm. The changes to the Night's Watch itself reflect the broader transformations that have swept the Seven Kingdoms. No longer a dumping ground for criminals and political exiles, the Watch has become an honored institution staffed by volunteers who understand the importance of defending the realm against threats from beyond the Wall. Jon's leadership has been instrumental in these reforms, his unique understanding of both wildling culture and southern politics making him an ideal bridge between different worlds. The threat from beyond the Wall has been addressed through negotiation and integration, rather than simple military opposition. Jon's relationships with the Free Folk having paved the way for peaceful coexistence that benefits both sides of the ancient barrier. The wildlings who choose to settle south of the Wall find acceptance in a realm that has learned to value diversity and cooperation over suspicion and conflict. In King's Landing, the Iron Throne is occupied by Tommen Baratheon, whose legitimacy was established through careful investigation and legal precedent rather than simple military conquest. The young king, educated under the guidance of advisors chosen for their wisdom and integrity, represents a new model of monarchy based on service rather than domination. Queen Margaery Tyrell, his wife and partner in governance, brings to the throne the political acumen of the Reach, combined with a genuine commitment to the welfare of the realm's common people. Their marriage, arranged for political reasons but grown into genuine affection, demonstrates the possibility of royal unions based on mutual respect and shared values rather than mere convenience. The small council that advises them includes figures whose presence would have been unimaginable in the corrupt court of the original timeline. Tyrion Lannister serves as Master of Coin, his brilliant financial mind finally given scope for honest application. Samwell Tarly, his education at the Citadel completed, serves as Grand Maester, bringing both scholarly knowledge and practical wisdom to the position. Davos Seaworth continues as Master of Ships, his common origins no longer a barrier to advancement, in a realm that has learned to value competence and integrity over birth and connections. The former smuggler's practical wisdom and unwavering honesty have made him one of the most trusted figures in the kingdom. The broader political landscape of the Seven Kingdoms reflects the triumph of cooperation over conflict that began with Ned's trial by combat. The great houses worked together through regular councils and established legal procedures rather than the constant maneuvering and warfare that characterized the original timeline. House Lannister, led by Tyrion after his father's death, has found a new role as financial administrators and legal scholars rather than military dominators. The family's wealth and administrative skills serve the realm's needs, while their previous reputation for ruthlessness has been replaced by respect for their competence and reliability. House Baratheon, through Stannis' continued service as Lord of Dragonstone and Master of Laws, provides the legal expertise and unwavering commitment to justice that helps maintain the reformed system of governance. Stannis' rigid adherence to duty has found positive expression in codifying the legal precedents that emerged from the constitutional crisis. The religious landscape of the realm has similarly evolved, with the faith playing an active but balanced role in promoting social justice while respecting the autonomy of secular governance. The High Septon who supported Ned's trial has been succeeded by leaders who continue his legacy of speaking truth to power while avoiding the extremism that marked some previous religious movements. The economy of the Seven Kingdoms has flourished under honest governance, with trade routes secured by competent administration and legal disputes resolved through fair courts rather than corrupt influence. The prosperity that results benefits all levels of society, from great merchants to small farmers who no longer fear arbitrary taxation or legal persecution. Cultural developments have kept pace with political and economic changes, as artists and scholars find patronage for work that celebrates noble themes rather than cynical observations about the futility of honor. The stories told by minstrels increasingly focus on the possibility of good triumphing over evil, reflecting the lived experience of a generation that has seen such triumph in their own time. The education of young nobles emphasizes the practical application of honorable principles rather than the cynical calculation that characterized political training in the corrupt era. Schools and universities throughout the realm teach that leadership requires service and that power must be exercised with justice and restraint. International relations have similarly benefited from the realm's transformation, as other kingdoms find Westeros a reliable and honorable partner in trade and diplomacy. The reputation for keeping agreements and treating allies fairly has opened new opportunities for cooperation that benefit all parties involved. The personal relationships that bloom throughout this transformed realm reflect the broader theme of love conquering fear that began with Ned's courageous stand for truth. Marriages are more often based on mutual respect and affection rather than mere political calculation, while friendships cross traditional boundaries of class and region. The children growing up in this transformed world learn different lessons about the nature of power and responsibility than their counterparts in the original timeline. They see daily examples of leaders who serve rather than dominate, of conflicts resolved through law rather than violence, of cooperation triumphing over competition. The legacy of Ned's choice extends into the future through these children, who will carry forward the values of honor and justice that his victory validated. Their understanding of leadership as service rather than domination will shape the next generation of governance in the Seven Kingdoms. As evening falls over Winterfell and the Stark family completes their meal together, the scene represents not just personal happiness, but the vindication of everything Ned chose to fight for in that trial by combat years ago. His willingness to risk everything for his principles has created a world where love indeed conquers fear, where honor provides practical guidance for daily life, and where the bonds of family and duty create strength rather than burden. The alternative timeline shows that single moments of courage can indeed reshape entire worlds, that the choice to stand for truth can create cascading changes that benefit generations, and that the power of love and honor remains stronger than any force arrayed against them. In this realm, where justice prevails and families remain whole, the true meaning of victory becomes clear. As we draw near the end of this journey through an alternative timeline, it becomes important to pause and reflect on the deeper meanings hidden within this tale of one man's courage and its far-reaching consequences. The story of Ned Stark's trial by combat offers more than just entertainment or escapism. It provides profound insights into the nature of choice, the power of conviction, and the ripple effects that flow from moments of moral clarity. The transformation we have witnessed in the Seven Kingdoms began with a single decision made in the most desperate of circumstances. Faced with the choice between false confession and almost certain death, Ned chose a third path that his enemies had not anticipated. His demand for trial by combat was not merely a legal maneuver, but a declaration of faith in the possibility that truth and justice could still prevail even in the most corrupt of environments. This choice illuminates something fundamental about the nature of moral courage. It is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act rightly despite fear. Ned understood the risks of his decision, knew that he might die regardless of the trial's outcome, yet he chose to trust in principles larger than his own survival. This kind of courage cannot be taught through books or lectures. It must be cultivated through years of consistent choices that build character and strengthen resolve. The ripple effects that flowed from Ned's choice demonstrate how individual actions can influence vast systems in ways both predictable and surprising. His victory in trial by combat did not merely save his own life, it validated a set of principles that had seemed nearly extinct in Westeros. The demonstration that honor could triumph over corruption inspired others to reconsider their own choices and allegiances. We see this most clearly in the transformation of figures like Tyrion Lannister, whose intellectual understanding of justice became emotional commitment when he witnessed its practical victory. The dwarf's journey from cynical observer to active participant in reform shows how witnessing authentic courage can awaken dormant nobility in even the most unlikely hearts. Similarly, the common people of King's Landing who rallied behind Ned's cause were not responding to political calculation, but to the recognition of something genuine in a world full of pretense. Their support grew not because they expected personal benefit, but because they hungered for leaders who embodied the values they had been taught to admire, but rarely saw practiced by those in power. The international response to Ned's trial reveals another important truth about the nature of leadership and legitimacy. Houses throughout the Seven Kingdoms, and even across the Narrow Sea, began to align themselves with his cause, not because of military threat or financial incentive, but because of moral authority. His willingness to risk everything for his principles created a form of soft power that proved more effective than traditional methods of political influence. This suggests that true authority flows not from the ability to compel obedience, but from the capacity to inspire voluntary cooperation. Leaders who consistently demonstrate integrity and courage find that others willingly follow them, while those who rule through fear and corruption must constantly struggle to maintain their positions against internal and external challenges. The transformation of institutions throughout the realm following Ned's victory provides insight into how systemic change occurs. The corruption that had infected the government, the faith, and even the military did not disappear overnight, but the demonstration that alternatives were possible created space for gradual reform. Individuals within these institutions who had been suppressing their own moral instincts found courage to act on their convictions. The Night's Watch represents perhaps the clearest example of this institutional transformation. An organization that had become a dumping ground for criminals and political exiles was reformed into an honored institution that attracted volunteers motivated by genuine service to the realm. This change was possible because Jon Snow's leadership provided a living example of how the Watch's original noble purposes could be revived and adapted to contemporary circumstances. The personal relationships that flourished in this alternative timeline demonstrate how political transformation enables human flourishing. When people no longer need to constantly guard against betrayal and corruption, they become free to form deeper connections based on mutual respect and shared values. The marriages and friendships that bloom throughout the reformed realm show love conquering the fear that had previously poisoned human interactions. The Stark family's reunion and continued prosperity serves as a microcosm of these broader changes. In the original timeline, political corruption and moral compromise scattered and destroyed the family, with children forced to grow up alone and traumatized. In this alternative, the preservation of moral principles allowed the family bonds to strengthen rather than break, providing security and support that enabled each member to flourish. This pattern extends beyond the Starks to families throughout the realm. When governance operates according to predictable principles rather than arbitrary whim, when justice can be expected rather than purchased, when honest service is rewarded rather than punished, families can invest in long-term relationships and planning rather than constantly preparing for catastrophe. The cultural changes that emerge from this political transformation reveal how deeply connected our artistic and intellectual life is to our moral environment. In a realm where honor and justice prevail, stories and songs naturally celebrate these values, creating a feedback loop that reinforces positive behavior. Children growing up hearing tales of courage and integrity are more likely to embody these qualities themselves. The educational reforms that spread throughout the transformed kingdom reflect an understanding that sustainable change requires not just new policies, but new ways of thinking about leadership and responsibility. When young nobles learn that their privileges come with obligations to serve others rather than simply to dominate them, they are more likely to become the kind of leaders that a just society requires. The economic prosperity that follows political reform demonstrates the practical benefits of honest governance. When merchants can rely on fair courts, when taxes are collected according to established law rather than arbitrary demand, when corruption no longer adds hidden costs to every transaction, the entire economic system operates more efficiently. This efficiency benefits everyone from great lords to common farmers. The international implications of Westeros's transformation suggest that the influence of moral leadership extends far beyond national boundaries. Other kingdoms that witness the prosperity and stability that flow from just governance are inspired to examine their own practices. The reputation for reliability and honor in international dealings creates opportunities for cooperation that benefit all parties involved. Perhaps most importantly, this alternative timeline demonstrates that cynicism about the possibility of positive change is not wisdom, but a form of intellectual laziness. The belief that corruption is inevitable, that power always corrupts, that ordinary people cannot influence large systems, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that prevents the very changes it claims are impossible. The story of Ned Stark's trial by combat shows that transformation is possible when individuals have the courage to act on their convictions regardless of the apparent odds against success. His victory was not guaranteed by superior swordsmanship alone, but by the moral authority that attracted support from unexpected quarters and inspired others to take risks for justice. The lesson extends beyond the fictional realm of Westeros to our own world and our own choices. Every day presents opportunities to choose between expedience and principle, between going along with corruption and standing up for what is right, between cynical acceptance of injustice and hopeful action for positive change. The ripple effects that flow from our individual choices may not be as dramatic or as visible as those in our story, but they are real nonetheless. When we choose integrity over convenience, when we support truth over comfortable lies, when we act with courage despite fear, we create small changes that can grow into larger transformations. The alternative timeline we have explored together serves as both inspiration and challenge. It shows us what becomes possible when good people refuse to accept evil as inevitable, when leaders choose service over domination, when communities unite behind shared values rather than divide over competing interests. As we prepare to conclude this journey through possibilities, we carry with us the understanding that the choices we make in our own lives matter more than we might imagine. The courage to stand for truth, the willingness to risk security for principle, the decision to trust in love rather than fear. These seemingly small acts contain the seeds of transformation that can reshape not just our personal lives, but the wider world around us. The reflection on possibilities reveals that hope is not naive optimism, but a rational response to the evidence that positive change remains possible when people have the courage to pursue it. The story of Ned Stark's trial by combat reminds us that in our own moments of choice, we too have the power to change the course of history through the simple but profound act of doing what we know is right. The evening settles gently over the Seven Kingdoms like a soft blanket drawn over a sleeping child. In this timeline, where honor conquered fear and love triumphed over hatred, the realm rests in peaceful contentment, knowing that tomorrow will bring justice rather than chaos, hope rather than despair, prosperity rather than suffering. The transformation that began with one man's courageous choice has created a world worth dreaming about. At Winterfell, the great castle stands strong against the northern winds, its walls no longer fortress ramparts against enemies, but protective arms, embracing all who seek shelter within. The God's Wood whispers with ancient peace, as the Heart Tree watches over a land where the old gods and the new work together in harmony. In the great hall, the last embers of the evening fire cast gentle shadows on empty chairs, their occupants having retired to chambers where sleep comes easily to those whose consciences are clear. Ned Stark rests beside his beloved Catelyn, their shared breath forming the rhythm of a love that has deepened through trials overcome together. His sleep is peaceful, unmarked by the nightmares that might have haunted a different timeline. In his dreams he walks through fields of summer snow where all his children play together, their laughter carrying on winds that speak of endless possibilities for goodness in the world. Catelyn's dreams are filled with the warmth of family gatherings where no chair sits empty, where every face shows the contentment that comes from living in a world where mothers need not fear for their children's safety. Her rest is the deep slumber of a woman who has seen her worst fears transformed into her greatest joys through the power of one moment of moral courage. In chambers throughout Winterfell, the next generation sleeps with the innocence of children who have never known a world where honor was a weakness rather than a strength. They dream of adventures in lands where knights truly serve justice, where princesses are valued for their wisdom as well as their beauty, where dragons and wolves work together to protect rather than destroy. The servants and guards of Winterfell rest easy knowing that their service contributes to something meaningful and lasting. Their dreams are filled with the satisfaction that comes from honest work fairly rewarded, from living under leaders who remember that true nobility comes from service to others rather than domination over them. Throughout the North, in castles great and small, similar scenes of peaceful rest unfold. The mountain clans sleep in their halls, knowing that their independence is respected, while their contributions to the greater good are valued. The fishing villages along the coasts dream of nets full of silver fish and markets where honest dealing ensures prosperity for all. At the Wall, the Night's Watch maintains its vigilant but peaceful guard. Jon Snow walks the battlements under stars that shine on a border where cooperation has replaced conflict, where the ancient enmity between wildling and southerner has given way to mutual respect and shared purpose. His dreams are of unity achieved through understanding rather than conquest, of barriers that protect without dividing. In the lands beyond the Wall, the free folk sleep in their own beds, no longer refugees fleeing destruction, but neighbors contributing to the prosperity of all. Their children dream of growing up in a world where their heritage is celebrated rather than feared, where diversity strengthens the whole rather than threatening the established order. King's Landing sleeps under a gentle moon that illuminates clean streets where honest merchants prepare for markets where quality goods find ready buyers. The City Watch patrols with pride rather than resentment, protecting citizens who trust them rather than fear them. In the great houses and humble hovels alike, people rest knowing that tomorrow's justice will be fair and tomorrow's laws will be just. The Red Keep itself has been transformed into a true seat of justice, where the Iron Throne serves not as a symbol of domination, but as a reminder of the responsibility that comes with power. King Tommen and Queen Marjorie sleep in chambers where the weight of the crown feels light because it is carried with the support of subjects who freely offer their loyalty. The small council chambers, once scenes of scheming and corruption, now host dreams of legislation that will improve the lives of common folk, of trade agreements that benefit all parties, of diplomatic solutions that preserve peace without sacrificing principle. Even in sleep, the realm's leaders continue to serve through dreams of better tomorrows. In the Reach, the fields stretch endlessly under starlight, their bounty ensuring that none shall hunger in the coming year. The great houses sleep in halls where tapestries tell stories of cooperation rather than conquest, where bards sing of heroes who saved through wisdom rather than warfare. Children dream of growing up to be like the lords and ladies who chose service over selfishness. The Riverlands rest beside gentle waters that carry trade and communication rather than armies and siege engines. The ancient castles along the rivers have become centers of learning and culture, their libraries growing as scholars from throughout the known world come to study in a realm where knowledge is pursued for the betterment of all rather than the advantage of few. In the Vale, the mountain halls echo with peaceful silence as the proud houses sleep secure in their independence while committed to their contribution to the greater good. The Eyrie looks out over lands where justice flows as freely as the mountain streams, where the ancient words about honor and duty have regained their meaning through daily practice. Dawn sleeps under desert stars that shine on a land where ancient grievances have been replaced by new opportunities for cooperation. The patience and wisdom of House Martell have found their reward in a realm where justice finally addresses old wrongs while building foundations for lasting peace. Even the water gardens whisper with contentment as they reflect a world where healing has replaced hatred. The Iron Islands rock gently in seas that carry merchant vessels rather than raiding ships, their hardy people finding honor in building rather than taking, in protecting the realm's coasts rather than threatening them. The sound of waves against stone speaks of eternal rhythms that continue unchanged while human hearts discover new ways to find meaning and purpose. At Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon sleeps the deep sleep of a man whose rigid adherence to law has finally found its proper outlet in service to justice rather than mere duty. His dreams are of legal codes that protect the weak, of courts that serve truth, of a realm where his unbending nature helps maintain the foundations of fairness for all. The faith sleeps in septs throughout the realm, their prayers answered not through miraculous intervention, but through the miracle of human hearts choosing righteousness over convenience. Septons and scepters dream of congregations that grow not through fear of damnation, but through attraction to the beauty of lives lived in service to others. The Maesters in their towers rest surrounded by knowledge that serves healing rather than harm, by ravens that carry news of prosperity and peace rather than war and destruction. Their dreams are of discoveries that improve life for all, of wisdom shared freely rather than hoarded for advantage, of a world where learning serves love. In the free cities across the narrow sea, merchants sleep counting profits from honest trade, with a realm that keeps its word and honors its agreements. Sailors dream of fair winds carrying them to ports where they are welcomed as friends rather than viewed with suspicion, where goods and ideas flow freely in all directions. Even in distant Essos, Daenerys Targaryen sleeps under foreign stars, her dreams touched by reports of a Westeros transformed by justice and mercy. Her visions of eventual return no longer focus on conquest and vengeance, but on the possibility of ruling a realm that has already learned to govern itself through wisdom and cooperation. The children throughout this peaceful realm sleep perhaps most soundly of all, their dreams unclouded by the cynicism that marked previous generations. They see futures filled with possibility, where their talents can be used for building rather than destroying, where their energy can be channeled into creation rather than competition, where their love can grow without fear of betrayal or loss. The very land itself seems to rest more peacefully, the forests whispering with contentment, the fields lying fallow with the quiet satisfaction of earth that has been tended with care rather than exploited with greed. Rivers run clear, mountains stand proud, and shores welcome gentle tides that speak of harmony between humanity and nature. As this night of perfect peace draws toward dawn, the realm prepares for another day of justice, another day of prosperity, another day of hope fulfilled rather than deferred. The choices made in moments of crisis have created a world where every sunrise brings new opportunities for goodness to flourish and expand. The dreams that fill this peaceful night are not merely individual fantasies, but collective visions of what becomes possible when people choose courage over comfort, when leaders choose service over domination, when communities choose cooperation over conflict. These dreams have substance because they rest on foundations built through real choices that created real change. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, as every day must, but they will be the challenges of growth rather than survival, of choosing between good options rather than avoiding disaster, of building on success rather than recovering from failure. The realm sleeps secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brings, it will be faced with wisdom, justice, and love. In this timeline, where honor conquered fear, where truth triumphed over lies, where love proved stronger than hatred, the Seven Kingdoms dream the deep dreams of those who have found their way home. The peace that settles over the land is not the mere absence of conflict, but the presence of justice, not the silence of oppression, but the quiet contentment of harmony achieved. As you listen to this tale of transformation and rest in your own peaceful place, perhaps you too can dream of possibilities yet unrealized, of choices still to be made, of courage yet to be summoned. For in the end, every timeline begins with a single choice. Every transformation starts with one person's decision to do what is right, despite the cost. Sleep well, knowing that in this alternative world, all is as it should be. And perhaps in your dreams, you too will find the courage to create the changes your own world needs. The gentle rest of the Seven Kingdoms reminds us that peace is possible, justice is achievable, and love truly can conquer all when given the chance to flourish. Dream sweetly of what if, and wake tomorrow ready to make your own choices that might change everything for the better.